Okay, well, first of all, thank you for the privilege of sharing this Shakespeare stuff with you. I find it fascinating. It does bump into a lot of stuff to do with Tom's big toe theories, and that'll become more relevant and pertinent as we progress. So I'd ask you simply to strap in and enjoy the ride, and you'll see where we bump into other theories too. So, first of all, just like to mention a few thank yous, just in case we don't get time at the end and in case it slips my mind. First of all, thank you to Donna for arranging this and for being such a stalwart supporter of my work. I really appreciate it, and I feel the warmth of your support and kindness. So thank you for that. Also to Keith on technical support, which now includes Jamie and Leslie. So thank you also for looking after stuff there, and also a thank you for Tom Campbell as well for sharing such a fascinating set of theories with us. Okay, so let's move forward. Some quotes about Shakespeare. His drama is the mirror of life, said Samuel Johnson, and it is incredible how accurate he is at reflecting the true nature of life itself and what it means to be human. Ben Jonson, at the time of Shakespeare's death, said he's not of an age, but for all time. And I think that's why his literature lasts so long, is that it's so relevant even today. His works may be considered a map of life, said Samuel Johnson, the other Johnson. Throughout the presentation, I'll be referencing these two guides together with my guide to Hamlet, which is not yet finished, as Donna mentioned. The only reason I mention this is that as we go to the pages, it'll be clear that there's annotations and glossary which can prove helpful, especially as we go further. The first thing I'd like to say is that Shakespeare's openings, the very first lines in Shakespeare plays, are usually far more pertinent than most people realize or give them credit for. This is particularly true in the later plays in the second half of his career. And we'll look at some of those to begin with. So, the opening of Hamlet. The first scene opens the night before the coronation and marriage of Claudius to Gertrude. It's dark and cold. A sentry, Francisco, is pacing the castle battlements when he hears footsteps in the dark. It is a fellow sentry, Bernardo, who has come to take over watch duty. Their exchanges are nervous and furtive. Their lines are short and rapid. And it's like this. And this gives you a sense of what the play looks like inside there.
In a play riddled with uncertainty, questions, and philosophical contemplations, it is fitting that at first they do not know who the other is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, this is very important because the play is full of questions in Hamlet, questions about life, about identity, about the nature of death, the nature of reality. And it begins with this uncertain question, who's there? That's what Bernardo says. And as the sentry on duty, Francisco believes he is the one who should be answered to. He says, nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. They're typically on some kind of foggy, misty battlements where they can't see each other properly. Unfold obviously means reveal or declare. Bernardo says, long live the king. And we presume that's a password or a passphrase. And it's an ironic one, too, since this is a play which concerns the murder of kings. Hamlet's father, King Hamlet, has just been murdered, and it's in very suspicious circumstances. He's away at university, and he finds out that not only has his father died, but his mother's married his uncle very, very quickly. In fact, Hamlet basically says that the spread that was laid out for people to eat at the funeral was served later as a cold buffet for the for the wedding. The funeral baked meats did coldly furnish forth the marriage table, he says. So he's given the password, long live the king. Francisco says Bernardo. Bernardo says he, meaning the very same, it is I. Now, to the average reader, that just seems like a kind of prosaic beginning to introduce us to the play. But I would assert that the openings of all of Shakespeare's later work are very pertinent to what then follows, as we shall see. If we take the opening of Macbeth, the play opens with thunder, lightning, and a meeting of three witches. And as with most of Shakespeare's plays, the opening scene sets the tone of the play, introducing its main themes. This is a play about the nature of evil, about greed, about cause and effect, about fate and destiny, dark forces and unseen realms. Samuel Taylor Coleridge said about this scene, the true reason for the first appearance of the witches is to strike the keynote of the character of the whole drama. And indeed it does.
This very short scene creates suspense about what it is the witches are plotting. They speak in mysterious sentences with odd rhythms, often in couplets of 7 syllables, and appear to be mouthing incantations. We can presume that the play starts just as the witches' meeting is ending because they are arranging their next meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So the first witch says, when shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? It's really interesting and very modern to begin a story with the end of a meeting, not the beginning of a meeting. And then the second witch says, when the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won. So when all the strife and confusion and turmoil has been dealt with. Interestingly enough, when the witches speak as well, it might be worth pointing this out. Shakespeare uses different meters to introduce different tones of voice. So when he changes a language from prose, say, to poetry, there's a reason for that. It's never accidental, and it always is to express a different tone of voice. In the case of the witches, it's a very unusual meter. There's 7 syllables. By the pricking of my thumbs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But at the same time, there's an unusual stress of 4. So there's something wicked this way comes. And that's a really unusual meter called trochaic tetrameter. And I just mentioned that as an aside, because if you want to deepen your journey with Shakespeare, it's really interesting just looking at when rhythms change. That's such an unusual rhythm because the witches are meant to be other, alien, different to us. And so we move to the opening of King Lear, and we can start to talk about representation. The play opens with friends and family waiting around in Lear's palace. He will enter soon and set about dividing his inheritance between his 3 daughters. As he is 80-odd years old, he wants to, as he says, shake all cares and business from his age, conferring them on younger strengths. So he's going to divide his kingdom. And this is the very first line in King Lear. It's Kent saying, I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. In other words, I thought the king liked or preferred Albany more than Cornwall. And Gloucester says, it did always seem so to us, but now in the division of the kingdom, it appears not which of the dukes he values most. Now, I've emboldened words just to emphasize the difference between how things seem and how things might actually be, and the difference between them. And that sets the tone for what a lot of King Lear is about. A lot of King Lear is about the difference between representation and reality. So the key theme is appearances versus actuality, or representation versus reality. And these themes are consolidated as the play unfolds. They're not just a one-off. They ripple through the whole play like marble. And the first lines that King Lear has are these: meantime, we shall express our darker purpose. That just means our more serious matter. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in 3 our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we unburdened crawl toward death. It's very melodramatic, the king, while we unburdened crawl toward death. This is the voice of a martyr and as someone who's very egocentric. But notice the map in a play that deals with representation and reality. This king is rolling out a map. What is a map but a representation of a reality? And this is all within the very first scene. So I've put that the use of the map here is not accidental. It serves as a representation of reality. And this follows, something follows this, which is very interesting, is that in a moment, Lear will confuse representation with reality when he takes flattery to signify love. So we've got a painting by René Magritte, painted in 1929. It's all about representation and reality. Ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is not a pipe. It caused an outrage. He was a Belgian surrealist. As I say, he painted this in 1929. And people were very shocked by this. And people argued that he shouldn't say that. And it's going to cause confusion in the minds of people. And it's going to, cause chaos. And people used to say, it is a pipe. And Magritte would say, well, can you smoke it? And clearly they couldn't. They were confusing a representation with a reality. 3 years later, he made this painting, The Human Condition, which is exploring a similar theme. And in this painting, which he did in 1933, you've got this easel set up at a window with a canvas. And someone has been painting very accurately the scene outside the window. And you can see the edge of the frame just here. And it lines up so perfectly with the background that we could say it's a very, very accurate representation. And we might consider that the painting on the easel is the representation and outside is the reality. But of course, Magritte is playing with games with us on top of that, in that they're both paintings. The background is also a painting. So we have nested realities within one another there. And it's just worth bearing that in mind as we continue our journey. So King Lear is the story of a king who's dividing his kingdom between his three daughters. The two on the left, Goneril and Regan, are very unpleasant characters and simply want to flatter their daddy so that they can gain a bigger inheritance. Cordelia is much more true and has personal integrity and basically doesn't want to play this flattery game. So the king asks them to say how they love him. It's a very shallow, egotistical game, and it causes an awful lot of trouble in the play. So Goneril begins. She says, "Sir, I love you more than word can wield the matter, dearer than eyesight, space, and liberty, beyond what can be valued, rich or rare, no less than life, with grace, health, beauty, honour, as much as child e'er loved or father found, a love that makes breath poor and speech unable, beyond all manner of so much I love you." It's so overblown, and she's saying those things because she wants a large portion of land and inheritance. That's why the map is there. I mean, she's saying she loves her dad more than life itself. It's dearer than eyesight, space, liberty. Her own freedom is not important to her, only her love of her father. Regan, the other daughter, who's not so good, steps up. And she says, "I'm made of that self-metal as my sister." So she's made of the exact same stuff as her sister. Metal just means the material. And prize me at her worth. In other words, make sure you give me the same amount that you would give her. In my true heart, I find she names my very deed of love. And then she reflects. She says, only she comes too short. She wants a bit more land. That I profess myself an enemy to all other joys which the most precious square of sense possesses. That's the most decent common sense possesses. And I find I am alone felicitate. That means joyful, happy in your dear highness's love. So the only joy she has in life is in her father. Now, again, we're bumping into representation and reality. Flattering words are not the same as real love. Later in the play, when Lear realizes that Goneril and Regan's words were just empty flattery, he refers to their behavior as a convenient seeming. Remember the opening of the play? I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. It did always seem so to us, the difference between seeming and actuality. I think convenient seeming is just so economic. Two words that say so much. So pressure's growing on Cordelia, Lear's youngest daughter, to play this flattery game, and Lear is foolishly dividing their inheritance according to how much each daughter can flatter him. So while they're flattering their father, Cordelia at one side, and I can read this one, says, and this is from the book, so it's in context. It says, the following aside by Cordelia reveals that she is feeling growing pressure to deliver even greater flattery than her false sisters. She contrasts her poor position, an obligation to be false and please her father with flattery, with her genuine richness, the genuine richness of her love. Cordelia says then, poor Cordelia. And yet not so, since I'm sure my love's more ponderous than my tongue. And in my books, I've got a little glossary underneath for any arcane words or words that are not in common parlance. Key one here is ponderous. It's more weighty. Her love is far more weighty than her tongue. So Cordelia knows that words fail to accurately describe or express genuine love. When she flatly refuses to flatter her father in exchange for land, he's enraged and he banishes her. But before she leaves, she makes her case. And by the way, in the play, when he asks her to speak, she says the word nothing, which in our modern currency would be the equivalent of no comment.
Cordelia wishes to confirm France's conclusion that she hasn't done anything monstrous or foul. What she lacks is the ability to lie and to make false promises. She doesn't broadcast false pledges. She simply acts instead of talking.
Thank you very much. Indeed. Well, when the king is banishing Cordelia, the king of France comes to her aim and says she hasn't done anything monstrous or foul. And Cordelia, obviously agrees with this. So she says, I yet beseech your majesty, remember this is her father, if for I want that glib and oily art to speak and purpose not, since what I well intend, I'll do it before I speak. What she's saying, and look at that phrase, glib and oily art to speak and purpose not. Isn't that what we get from most politicians on planet Earth? The glib and oily art to speak and purpose not. I think that's a perfect definition of spin. Um, she's saying if I want it, if I'm lacking in that, then that I'm not interested. Since what I well intend, I'll do it before I speak. I'll be as true as my word. I mean, one key thing in psychotherapy is for people to learn that other people show you who they are in their behavior, and that people's behavior reflects their character. So I'll continue with the annotation there. She's done nothing awful, despite Leah's comments that nature is ashamed of her. I mean, what a terrible thing to say about your own daughter. That you make known it is no vicious blot, murder, or foulness, no unchaste action or dishonoured step that hath deprived me of your grace and favour. She's simply been true to herself, and she's not willing to play the game of flattery. And she knows her fortunes are hurt by her lack of conniving and her refusal to speak lies and flatter. Nevertheless, she's glad to lack such attributes, even though it's cost her dearly. That's where she says, but even for want of that for which I'm richer, a still soliciting eye and such a tongue that I'm glad I have not. though not to have it has lost me in your liking. So she's lost out by not being still soliciting, still in that context means always. Like, are you still doing that? Are you carrying on with that behavior? Always begging, soliciting. That's what sisters are doing, and to have a lying tongue. And not to have those things has lost her in her father's liking. Leah's responses by this time are appalling and petulant. Better thou hadst not been born than not to have pleased me better. Dreadful behavior. Again, from these speeches that you've just been looking at, you can see that reality and false representation are highlighted. In red, I've put the language that's to do with false representation, that a tongue can say things that a person doesn't match. Same with glib and oily art, to speak and purpose not. And reality is to do what I intend, and you do it before you speak. You just behave that way. So when representations are misrepresentations, then problems arise. And all our representations fall short of reality. Every representation of reality is, in a sense, a map of that reality. And some maps are deliberate falsifications, and others are useful simplifications. So that's the map of the London Underground. It's just a portion of it. Keith will know this well from living quite near to London previously. And you've got the different lines there. The line running vertically in the centre, the black line, is the northern line. The red horizontal is the central. The light blue line is the Victoria line. The yellow is the circle. And it helps us to understand what's underground. I think it's a very good piece of graphic design. But we need to remember that the map is not the territory. The real lines underground in London are actually laid out like that, geographically. Picasso had something useful to say about this, which is that art is a lie, which makes us realize the truth. We delete, we distort, and we generalize. And every map does that. If you go back to the London Underground map, any curve that's not on a 45-degree or a 90-degree is omitted, it's deleted, and it's tidied into such. We distort, of course. Look at how the circle line is in reality, and compare that to the map there, the yellow line. We've distorted it. And we've generalized everything so that it's 90 degrees or 45. And we live in maps, as we'll see. So we delete, we distort, and we generalize. Let's take a little break with a chess problem. And I'll need folks to be off mute just for a moment. If you look at this diagram with the square A and square B, can anyone tell me which chess piece can move in one go from A to B?
The knight.
The knight, indeed, indeed. Yep, this is a sophisticated audience. Some might say the horsey. Yes, indeed, the knight. Yeah. So the knight can move from A to B. And what if I told you that square A and square B were identical in tone and in color? You may have seen this before. Yeah, Kim has. So do they look the same? Do we
No, they don't
believe?
look. Nope.
No. Well, to prove that they are the same, I've brought this stripe here across. And if you look where that stripe meets the corner of A and the corner of B, they are in fact the same shade. It's simply an optical illusion. We take B as being lighter because we assume it's in the shadow of the cylinder. And I also used a little bit of sleight of mouth by introducing it as a chess problem, which cues you up to see squares as being black or white. And that pushes your mind even more in that direction. So I make my confession clear. Our maps can prevent us from sensing what is right in front of our eyes, our ears, nose, fingers, tongue. Our senses might not work accurately to what's in front of us because our map can go before us. This proves, as is written in the Talmud, we do not see things as they are, we see them as we are. So we affect the reality that we see. Can you imagine a map without any deletions, distortions, or generalizations? That would be an interesting proposition. And it's something that Lewis Carroll considered. Lewis Carroll, the writer of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. In one of his short stories called Sylvie and Bruno concluded, there's this dialogue. That's another thing we've learned from your nation, said Mein Herr, map making. But we've carried it much further than you. What do you consider the largest map that would be really useful? About 6 inches to the mile. Only 6 inches, exclaimed Mein Herr. We very soon got to 6 yards to the mile. Then we tried 100 yards to the mile, and then came the grandest idea of all. We actually made a map of the country on the scale of a mile to a mile. Have you used it much? I inquired. It has never been spread out yet, said Mein Herr. The farmers objected. They said it would cover the whole country and shut out the sunlight. So we now use the country itself as its own map, and I can assure you it does nearly as well. Obviously, a map on a scale of 1 to 1 is just as useless as a map where the scale is not big enough. Interestingly enough, in the play, when Shakespeare gives away Cordelia, he says to the King of France, who loves her, he says, will you have her? She is herself a dowry. She carries no dowry. He's taken that from her. And she herself, in her goodness, is the thing itself. And in one sense, that's a map on a scale of 1 to 1. Okay, this is open for discussion too. Our maps may prove faulty. What comments could we make about such an object, which is of 2 different types of wood fixed together with a joint? Are we familiar with dovetail joints?
It looks like you'll never get it apart.
Excellent. That's really intelligent, and I appreciate that. It looks like you could never get it apart. That sounded like Jamie's voice. I can't see everybody because my screen's open, but that's really accurate. Because dovetail joints run in a north-south and east-west fashion, you would never be able to get that apart. So what we have to do is create a different map and have it so that the dovetail joints meet adjacent rather than opposite, so that they slide off on a diagonal rather than straight through. It's hard for me to express what I mean there, but I hope you get what I'm saying. Maps can be faulty. The sign doesn't say Paris in the spring. What does it say? Keith's right. It says Paris in the spring. Now, if you read it as Paris in the spring, you can congratulate your brain for getting rid of extraneous material and going straight for the meaning. Your brain is working perfectly well. And if you read it as Paris in the spring, you can congratulate your brain for being very accurate and noticing exactly what was there. But our maps may prove faulty. Which reality are we living in? The way we approach our circumstances will affect our experience of reality. Here's a useful metaphor about a Mexican farmer. And he's got 2 horses here, but he began with 1 horse. And the ground's very dry, very scrub, just brush land. And he was farming, eking out enough of the produce to feed his family. And one day his horse ran away. And when the villagers gathered round in the evening, they said, it's really sad that your horse ran away. That's bad luck. But the farmer said, good luck, bad luck. Who knows? And they said, well, don't be stupid. You need your horse or you can't grow your produce. But he insisted, good luck, bad luck, who knows? And then 3 days later, the horse came back with 2 wild horses. So now he's got 3 horses. And of course, the villagers gather round in the evening. They drink wine and they chat. And they said, isn't that amazing? Great, good luck. You've got these 3 horses now. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? He said. They said, well, don't be stupid. You can pull more plough now and you'll be able to grow more produce and you'll be able to not only feed your family, but feed other people. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? And then his son was training one of the horses. I don't like the term, but they always use the term breaking them in. But he was trying to domesticate the horse enough to pull a plough. And he got thrown from the horse and he broke his leg. It was a bad break. The young son's leg was broken at the thigh bone, the femur. And he had to go to hospital. His leg was in plaster from groin to ankle. Again, the villagers gathered round in the evening. We heard about your son. Really bad luck. He said, good luck, bad luck, who knows? Again, they said, don't be stupid. Your son has got a broken leg. Are you telling me that's good luck? He said, well, good luck, bad luck, who knows? And then a few days later, 2 of the smaller villages nearby had a conflict that escalated and it became a civil war. And every young, able-bodied son was going to be sent off to die in a senseless war, except the farmer's son couldn't do that because his leg was in plaster. And on we could go. Was it good luck? Was it bad luck? It was anything good luck or bad luck. We don't know. I often think it's a bit like when people do a lovely piece of embroidery, it looks beautiful and they make a lovely picture. But on the other side, if you turn it round, it just looks like a messy confusion where little pieces grow and then stop, and then another color comes out, disappears, and it appears to make no sense. And I think in our level of experience, it's as if we're living on the wrong side of that. But in the greater reality, I think it's like the beautiful picture on the other side. Either way, we should reserve our judgment. I believe in a very real sense that life doesn't flow to us, but it flows from us. Again, the Talmud, we do not see things as they are, we see them as we are. Subjective experience flows from consciousness. So you'll see how this relates to Tom's work as well. Often it's in how we frame things, how we decide to deal with an event. So I remember being at a party where there's lots and lots of people in one house, and there was a queue on the stairs for the toilet. And some guy came out of the toilet, and then the woman in front of me went in. And when she came out, she was so angry. She said, he'd left the seat up. Men, what are they like? Don't they know we sit down on the seat? And she was in a very bad emotional state on account of this. And I remember thinking she could be pleased and think, how thoughtful of him. He lifted the seat to make sure it would be dry when I came in. It's a choice how we frame things, but our emotional state, and in that sense, the reality we experience, is affected by how we frame our experience and give it context and meaning. If somebody cuts out of us in a side road, and they just quickly go in front of us, we have to slam our brakes on. We could think what a fool they are, what an idiot they are, how stupid they are, how discourteous they are. And that puts us in a certain frame of mind. Or we could think, I wonder if that person's grandmother has just had a fall and they've got to get to them quickly. Or if that's somebody's girlfriend has just gone into labor. We can think what we like. The main thing is that the reality that we experience on a subjective level is determined by how we frame things. So we can either accept the way we frame something, or we can reframe it ourselves. A perceived limitation might be a gift when it's reframed. I once had a group of students I was teaching neuro-linguistic programming to, and there's an exercise where they each had to take turn to describe a limitation that they had. And it was the other person's job to see if they could find a reframe that was genuinely positive. I don't mean toxic positivity where we just grin and smile and say everything's lovely, but a genuine. And it's quite a funny one that happened is this guy was saying to this woman, they were working it all in pairs. And he said, I never seem to finish anything. He said, I do loads of DIY around the house and I start jobs and I start loads and loads of jobs, but I never ever seem to finish anything. And without missing a beat, she just said, you'd make an amazing lover. That's a reframe, and it'll help you to remember the reframe. So I'm sorry if that sounds a bit saucy. We frame our lives in metaphors. The way that we talk about things affects how we relate to our lives. So say, for example, a person who's got lots of things on in their life, if they say, oh, it's terrible, I'm spinning plates at the moment. Well, think about that metaphor they've given themselves to live in. What kind of a prison is that? If we're spinning plates all the time, it's a thankless operation. Eventually, they all fall down and there's nothing to be gained, and it's a very futile exercise. But if we were to think of it in terms of a metaphor, that we don't use in common language, but we could start using it if we were to think that we were tending the garden and there's so much to do in this garden of life. Eventually, we see things bloom. We get rewarded for that, and we can live in that metaphor, and it certainly changes how we feel. I'm not talking about some Pollyanna grinning rictus. I'm talking about genuinely thinking about how language can shape us. We live in narratives. We're the author of those narratives. Some narratives make us unhappy. And it's interesting, as a psychotherapist, it's amazing how many people are not just the prisoner in their lives, but they're also the jailer. And that's a really strange thing to get used to noticing it again and again. Sometimes we imprison ourselves. We may even have learned to keep ourselves unhappy. Not long ago, during summer, we were my wife and I, just walking down a road nearby, and there's a little old dear who we've helped now and then, and she had a Zimmer frame, a little frame, walking frame, and she's walking slowly, and we slowed to walk with her. And it was a beautiful day. The birds were singing. There's the smell of honeysuckle in people's little privets at the front, and birds were singing. The blue sky, cotton wool clouds. It was beautiful. And my wife just said to this woman, "It's a lovely day, isn't it?" And she stopped her Zimmer frame and she turned with a very sour look at my wife, and she said, "Yes, but it'll soon be raining." And that was her experience of a sunny day, that it will soon be raining. So it must be permanently raining. Sometimes the language we use creates the frames. Some frames enable and some disable. A useful example might be two different counselors dealing with someone with chronic depression. So the first counselor might say, "Come in, have a seat. I understand that you're a chronic depressive. So what we'll do is we'll talk all about your depression. You can have an hour telling me how it feels to be depressed, what your depression's like. And at the end of the hour, we can fix another appointment." Well, I don't think I'd give that counsellor my money. The second counsellor might say, "Come in, have a seat. I understand that up to now you've been experiencing some feelings of depression." Well, there's a start. Notice the language difference. Can anyone say what they felt was different in the language there?
The first one is closed. The door
Yes.
is closed. And the second one is full of possibility.
Lovely. Well spotted. I think that's an excellent description. The first one is closed. Come in, I understand you're a chronic depressive. The label is there. The box is shut. You're in it, and that's what you are. And the second one has lots of possibilities. That's a lovely word that someone's just used. Brilliant. The second one, if we quickly just take it apart, you'll see where the possibilities are. Have a seat. I understand that up to now. What does that suggest or imply?
That it's only up till it can change. It can change.
Exactly. Well said, Kim. It's only up to now. It can change. Exactly. Excellent. So he said it was very clumsy language, but it's very helpful language. Up to now, you've been experiencing. Now, there's a word. So again, it's just that it's an experience. It's not the sum total of who you are. Some feelings of depression, again, they're feelings. It's not the total of who you are. And the person who gave the first answer is really spot on with this word of possibilities. We want to make possibilities. We want to share love and set one another free so that we can be all that we can be. But sometimes we're incarcerated or disabled through language itself. Excellent. Some important points about framing and reframing. It must be used with ecology to help self and others, to enable and ennoble. And it's very dangerous to use framing to self-deceive, to excuse, or to cheat. Now, we can use Shakespeare again to have a look at this. Framing is very important, but it's to be used with integrity. It's very dangerous when people use these skills to deceive themselves, excuse themselves, or cheat. This is Lady Macbeth. Sorry, I should set the scene. Lady Macbeth has just encouraged her husband to go and murder the king so that Macbeth can become king. And he's murdered them while they're staying in his castle. So he's gone upstairs, he's stabbed them and his guards, having previously got them all drunk first. And then he's come back down to his wife. So thank you, Kim.
Sure. She notices that Macbeth has brought the murder weapons with him instead of leaving them next to the sleeping guards. Down here, they will implicate Macbeth and his wife. She tells him to take them back and smear the guards with the king's blood from their blades.
Excellent. Thank you. She says, why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood. Grooms, another word for the guards. But Macbeth refuses. He's troubled by what he has done, and he cannot revisit the scene. I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again. I dare not. He just doesn't want to go back into that room. And here's the reframe for after this page. She calls him a coward and takes the daggers to return them herself. Infirm of purpose. You're a coward. You're not able to do the action. You're infirm. You're disavowed of doing that. Give me the daggers. And then later he wonders if all the water in the world's oceans will clean his hands. And then he declares that they would not. Instead, the blood from his hands would turn all of the green seas red. Very powerful image there. I don't know if I've included her here, but when she tells him to go back and take the daggers up, she actually says to Macbeth, think of them as pictures. And there's a horrible reframe. Think of them as pictures. You'll remember Nazi propaganda during the outbreak of the Second World War. We were showing films and footage of rats in the street and using language about Jews over there. Think of them as rats Hitler invited. Lady Macbeth says about these dead bodies up there, think of them as pictures. Again, the dehumanization of people. And so Macbeth knows what will happen. He says, will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? And then he uses very flowery language. No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine. Incarnadine means make red. And then he says it flatly with very monosyllabic language, apart from making the green one red. Making the green one red is almost comedic after this flowery language of the multitudinous seas incarnadine. In the previous two lines, I mentioned that flowery there. So She declares that with just a little water, no one will be able to associate them with Duncan's murder. That's the king. She reassures him that it will be easy. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy it is then. Notice the contrast between their positions. Macbeth thinks all the world's oceans will not wash away the blood on his hands. Lady Macbeth thinks a little water will clear them of this deed. And a lot of studies on Macbeth actually have Macbeth and his wife on a similar journey, but I think they're on very different journeys. He begins very conflicted and very troubled by everything that she's plotting, and that eventually they plot together. She begins very conscienceless, but of course, and then later on at the end, he's just hacking his way through anyone, and he's the one without conscience. And as you know, she's very troubled and sees blood on her hands when it isn't there. Thus the line, out damned spot. Now, the primary goal of consciousness is to evolve towards greater love and cooperation. Wisdom is deeper than cleverness. Again, having just referenced Nazi Germany, it's a horrible thing to contemplate, but the people who built Auschwitz were clever people. They were not stupid people. They were architects, scientists, logicians, but they were not wise. What they did was horrendous. And I had a friend for many years who was an Auschwitz survivor, Leon Greenman. I still remember his number, 98288. And what happened in Auschwitz was horrendous. Poor guy lost his wife and 4-year-old son. As soon as they got there, they were gassed, and he had to try and persevere. And they only kept him because he was a barber and he could cut hair, and he was a good singer too. Wisdom is deeper than cleverness. Cleverness alone gets us to hell in a handcart very quickly. I would say wisdom is cleverness as if people mattered. And in Lear's journey, he gains a degree of awareness and understanding. He begins to reason his situation. It's not a journey from stupidity and hubris to incredible wisdom. It's a journey to someone who begins to understand things better. And that's good. One thing he contemplates is the situation of the homeless. In the play, he's made homeless himself. And he used to be a king in his castle with his robes and furred gowns, and he never knew about the plight of the homeless. But when Lear is said to have gone mad, he actually speaks the most sane lines in the whole play. And when he contemplates the poor and the houseless, he says, poor naked wretches, wheresoever you are, that bide the pelting of this pitiless storm, how shall your houseless heads and unfed sides, your looped and windowed raggedness, defend you from seasons such as these? So he begins to gain awareness and wisdom. And awareness of the interrelatedness of all beings is really important for personal growth. And Lear begins to understand the importance of caring for others. He's ashamed of how little thought he has given to the weak, the marginalized, and the outcast. And again, at a bit later, contemplating these things, he says, oh, I have ta'en just means taken, obviously. Oh, I have taken too little care of this. Take physic, pomp. Take your medicine, you pompous man. Take your lesson, as it were. Expose thyself to feel what wretches feel. Put yourself in their situation, that thou mayest shake the superflux to them, that you may share your excess riches with them, and show the heavens more just, and create a more fair society. This evolving love and desire for cooperation and fairness is a way of lowering the entropy. We also lower entropy and disorder when we learn, when we grow, and when we move from fear and ego and selfishness. For Lear, it leads him to consider the evils of unfair governance. So I can read this one, Kim, so you can have a rest for now. Lear has come to see that his royal status cannot shield him from the human condition. He considers the hypocrisy of social status and the sham of inequality. Poor people feel the full force of the law for their small misdemeanors, while the rich are protected from their crimes and immune from justice. Lear says, through tattered clothes small vices do appear, robes and furred gowns hide all. Plate sin with gold, and the strong lance of justice hurtless breaks. Arm it in rags, a pygmy's straw does pierce it. In other words, sin plated with gold is what much of the play is about. It's about disguises and convenient seeming, representations instead of reality, evil dressed up in finery, and false displays of sincerity. Our journey through this life is richer when we concern ourselves with truth, beauty, and goodness. When we grow and develop ourselves, we lower entropy. Indeed, our own self-development might be the greatest gift we can give to anyone. And that's obviously because we're all connected. There's a lovely little quote from Seth Godin, a business guru, and I've used Pooh and Piglet's picture to express it. I used to say, I'll look after you if you look after me. But now I say, I'll look after me for you if you look after you for me. I think that's very wise and very deep too. So I'll round this up by saying that my 500-page guides can be ordered through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all good booksellers. The ISBN numbers are there if anyone wants to order any. But I'm not really interested in pushing sales, genuinely. I'm just letting you know they're there if you want one. I'm more happy that we've shared this time together looking at Shakespeare. That's important to me. And I thank you all for your kind attention. And you can contact me by email if you want. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. And if there's time, feel free to comment or share any questions or comments that you may have. Thank you.